The laughter in courtroom 4B was loud, cruel, and echoing. Marcus Thorne, the city's most arrogant tech mogul, slapped his knee, pointing a manicured finger at his trembling wife, Elena. Even his high-priced lawyers smirked, treating the divorce proceedings like a victory lap. They thought they had crushed her. They thought she was leaving with nothing but the clothes on her back. But then Judge Harrison Caldwell adjusted his glasses, broke the seal on a thick velvet-bound envelope, and the room went deathly silent. When he read the first line of the document, Marcus's smile didn't just fade. It shattered. Elena wasn't the beggar they thought she was. She was the bank. The fluorescent lights of the Superior Court of Los Angeles hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz, but Elena barely heard them. She sat alone at the defendant's table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. She wore a simple grey cardigan and worn-out flats. The only nice clothes she had left after Marcus had locked her out of their shared accounts 3 weeks ago. On the other side of the aisle, the atmosphere was entirely different. It felt like a cocktail party. Marcus Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Dynamics, sat surrounded by a phalanx of legal sharks. He looked impeccable in a navy bespoke suit that cost more than Eleanor's father had made in a decade. Leaning over his shoulder was Gavin Sterling, a divorce attorney known in the city as the Butcher. They were whispering and chuckling occasionally, glancing back at the gallery where a young blonde woman in a red dress sat chewing gum and scrolling through her phone. That was Chloe, the personal assistant, the reason Eleanor was currently homeless. "All rise!" the bailiff bellowed. Judge Harrison Caldwell entered. He was an older man with a reputation for zero tolerance for courtroom theatrics, but even he looked weary today. He sat down, shuffling the towering stack of motions Marcus's team had filed. "Docket number 4492, the clerk announced. "Thorne v. Thorne. Final hearing on asset division and alimony." Gavin Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket with a confident smirk. "Your Honor, we are ready to proceed. My client, Mr. Thorne, simply wants this finalized so he can move on with his life. We've offered Mrs. Thorne a generous settlement of $5,000 to help her get back on her feet, considering she brought 0 assets into the marriage and contributed nothing to the growth of Thorne Dynamics." $5,000. It was an insult. Marcus had bought a watch worth 10 times that just last week. Elena remained silent. She had no lawyer. Marcus had drained their joint funds so quickly she couldn't afford a retainer, and legal aid had told her the case was too complex for them to handle on short notice. "Mrs. Thorne," Judge Caldwell said, looking over his spectacles. "You are representing yourself today." "Yes, Your Honor," Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. "Speak up, please," the judge said, though not unkindly. "Yes, Your Honor," she repeated louder this time. Marcus snickered. "She's shy, Judge. Not much for conversation, unless she's asking for my credit card." Gavin Sterling laughed politely. "Indeed. Your Honor, the facts are simple. Mr. Thorne is a self-made visionary. He built his company from the ground up during the 5 years of their marriage. Mrs. Thorne, on the other hand, has been unemployed for the duration of the union. She was effectively a dependent. We are arguing that she is entitled to nothing beyond the compassionate stipend we offered." Elena looked at Marcus. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He was too busy winking at Chloe in the back row. She remembered the nights he built his company. She remembered him crying on the bathroom floor because investors had pulled out. She remembered who stayed up until 400 a.m., proofreading his pitch decks because his grammar was terrible. She remembered who cooked, who cleaned, who ironed his suits, so he looked the part of a CEO, even when they were eating instant noodles. "Mr. Sterling," the judge cut in, "you are claiming Mrs. Thorne made no non-monetary contributions, none that equate to the value of $1 billion tech empire, Your Honor." Sterling scoffed. "She was a housewife, a mediocre one at that." Marcus leaned forward into the microphone. "She's a gold digger, Your Honor. She trapped me when I was vulnerable, and now she wants a payout. But I signed a prenup, a watertight one." "Ah, yes, the prenuptial agreement," Judge Caldwell said, pulling a document from the file. "Signed 5 years ago. It states that in the event of a divorce, each party leaves with exactly what they brought into the marriage, and any assets acquired independently remain separate." "Exactly," Sterling said, slamming his hand on the table for emphasis. "And since Mr. Thorne brought the intellect and the drive, and Mrs. Thorne brought, well, her student debt, the math is simple." The cruelty was suffocating. Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She reached into her canvas tote bag and pulled out a single sealed blue envelope. It wasn't large, but it was made of heavy, expensive paper. "Your Honor," Elena said, her voice shaking slightly. "May I submit a piece of evidence?" Sterling rolled his eyes. "Objection. Discovery is closed. She can't just hand over love letters or grocery lists now." "Overruled," the judge said, intrigued by Elena's calm demeanor amidst the mockery. "What is it, Mrs. Thorne?" "It is an addendum to the prenuptial agreement," Elena said, "and a disclosure of assets regarding the Thorne estate." Marcus burst out laughing. It was a loud barking sound that made everyone jump. "An addendum? I never signed an addendum. And what assets? You don't even own a car. Elena." He turned to the gallery, spreading his arms. "This is what I dealt with for 5 years. Delusions." The gallery tittered. Chloe giggled audibly. "Bring it here," Judge Caldwell ordered. The bailiff took the blue envelope from Elena's trembling hand and walked it up to the bench. The room was filled with the sound of Sterling whispering aggressively to Marcus, assuring him that whatever it was garbage. "She probably wrote a poem about how much she misses me," Marcus whispered back, loud enough for Elena to hear. "Pathetic." Elena sat straighter. For the first time all morning, she looked directly at Marcus. Her eyes weren't hard anymore. They were salt. Judge Caldwell held the envelope. He noticed the wax seal on the back. It wasn't a generic sticker. It was an embossed crest. A crest he recognized from his days in Ivy League law schools, usually associated with old money. The kind of money that didn't scream, but whispered. He slit the envelope open with a silver letter opener. The sound of the paper tearing was the only noise in the cavernous room. He pulled out 3 documents. The first was a notarized affidavit. The second was a bank statement. The third was a deed of trust. The judge adjusted his glasses. He read the first page. Then he stopped. He looked up at Elena, his eyebrows knitting together in confusion. Then he looked at Marcus, who was checking his watch, clearly bored. The judge read the second page. His eyes widened. He took a sip of water, his hand pausing mid-air. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said. His voice had changed. It was no longer the weary tone of a bureaucrat. It was sharp, alert. "You stated for the record that your client, Mr. Thorne, is the sole financial provider in this marriage." "Absolutely, Your Honor," Sterling said, standing up again. His tax returns show an income of $12 million last year. Mrs. Thorne's shows 0. And you are asking to enforce the prenuptial agreement strictly, that each party leaves with what they brought in, and that separate assets remain separate. Yes, Your Honor. That is the cornerstone of our case. We want strict enforcement, no alimony, no division of Mr. Thorne's hard-earned company. And Mr. Thorne, the judge turned his gaze to the CEO. You agree to this. You want the strict enforcement of the contract signed on August 14th, 2020. I do, Marcus said smoothly. Ironclad. That's how I do business. Very well, Judge Caldwell said. He placed the papers down on his desk, interlocking his fingers. Mrs. Thorne, why was this document not filed with the initial discovery? Because of the non-disclosure agreement, Your Honor, Elena replied softly. Clause 4. Section B of the trust required that I keep my identity anonymous until the dissolution of my marriage was imminent and inevitable. Since Mr. Thorne filed the final decree yesterday, the gag order on me is lifted. Trust, Marcus scoffed. What trust? Did your grandma leave you a used Honda? Quiet, Mr. Thorne, the judge snapped. The sharpness of the rebuke silenced the room. Judge Caldwell picked up the first document. This is a certification of the Vanderhaven Sovereign Trust. It is dated 2 months prior to your marriage. Sterling frowned. Vanderhaven, I've never heard of it. You wouldn't have, the judge said dryly. It is a private heritage fund managed out of Zurich, and according to this document, the sole beneficiary of the trust is one Eleanor Marie Thorne née Vance. Marcus rolled his eyes. Okay, so she has some money stashed away. What is it? 100 grand, good for her. She doesn't need my 5,000 then. Mr. Thorne. Please stop talking, the judge warned. He looked back at the papers. Mr. Sterling, you claimed your client's company. Thorne Dynamics was built from the ground up by him alone. Yes, he coded the initial software in his garage. And who funded the server costs, the marketing, the initial patent filings? The judge asked. Seed investors, angel investors. Sterling waved his hand dismissively. Standard startup capital. I see, the judge said. He picked up the second document. I have here a forensic accounting ledger from Blackwood Holdings, a shell company registered in Delaware. Elena spoke up, her voice steady. Mr. Sterling, do you recall the name of the angel investor who gave Marcus his first $2 million check? Sterling blinked. He looked at Marcus. Marcus frowned. Yeah, it was Blackwood Holdings, some anonymous venture capital group. They liked my pitch. They didn't like your pitch, Marcus, Elena said. They liked me. Marcus turned his chair to face her fully. What are you talking about? Judge, if you would read the beneficiary line for Blackwood Holdings, Elena asked. Judge Caldwell cleared his throat. The sole proprietor of Blackwood Holdings is Eleanor Marie Vance. The silence in the courtroom was sudden and absolute. It felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Marcus's face went slack. What? That's impossible, Sterling stammered. She was a barista when they met. I was a barista because I wanted to understand what it felt like to work, Elena said. I didn't want to live in the bubble my parents raised me in. But when I met you, Marcus, I believed in you. You had passion. You had no money, but you had dreams. So I had my trust manager authorize the seed funding through Blackwood. I funded you. I bought your servers. I paid for your patents. That's a lie, Marcus shouted, standing up. I did that. Me. Sit down. The bailiff took a step forward. Judge Caldwell raised a hand. We are not done. Mr. Sterling, you insisted on the strict enforcement of the prenup. Separate assets remain separate. Is that correct? Sterling looked pale. He was a smart lawyer. He saw the trap closing, but he couldn't stop it. Yes, Your Honor. But if she defrauded him, there is no fraud in investing anonymously, the judge said. Now let's look at the third document, the valuation. The judge looked at Elena with a mixture of awe and respect. Mrs. Thorne, am I reading this correctly? The current liquidity of the Vanderhaven Trust, combined with the accrued interest and the diversified portfolio. Yes, Your Honor, Elena said. Mr. Thorne, the judge said, looking at the husband who was now sweating profusely. You are worth on paper about $12 million, a respectable sum. The judge looked down at the paper. Mrs. Thorne's trust, however, which includes ownership of the land your factory is built on, by the way, is valued at $3.2 billion. Billion? Chloe, the mistress in the back, gasped loud enough for the microphone to catch it. With a beep. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. He gripped the table. 3 billion. And the judge continued, a small, grim smile playing on his lips. Since you, Mr. Thorne, and your counsel, Mr. Sterling, so aggressively argued for the prenuptial agreement to be upheld, that means Mrs. Thorne's assets are entirely hers. You are not entitled to a single penny of the Vanderhaven fortune. And since Blackwood Holdings, her company, owns 49% of Thorne Dynamics, as per the initial investment contract you signed, the judge paused for effect. She is effectively your boss. The silence in the courtroom was broken by the sound of Gavin Sterling frantically flipping through the stack of documents Judge Caldwell had passed down. The high-powered attorney, usually so composed, was sweating. A bead of perspiration rolled down his temple, staining the collar of his starch-white shirt. Your Honor, this has to be a mistake. Sterling stammered, his voice cracking. My client was unaware of these holdings. This constitutes a lack of full disclosure. It voids the prenup. On the contrary, Mr. Sterling, Judge Caldwell said, leaning back in his leather chair, a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. I've reviewed the paperwork. Mrs. Thorne disclosed her assets to the court in a sealed file as permitted for high net worth individuals under the Privacy and Safety Act of 2018. You and your client simply never asked for the sealed file because you assumed it was empty. You were too busy trying to expedite the divorce to humiliate her. Marcus Thorne looked like he had been struck by a physical blow. He turned to Elena, his face a mask of confusion and rising panic. Elena, you have $3 billion. Why did we live in that studio apartment? Why did we eat ramen for 2 years? Elena stood up. She didn't look like the broken woman from 20 minutes ago. She looked regal. Because I wanted to know if you loved me, Marcus, or if you just loved the lifestyle I could buy you. When we struggled, you were kind. You were humble. But the moment Thorne Dynamics made its first million money, I gave you, you changed. You became cruel. You hid money. You started sleeping with your assistant. She gestured to the back of the room. Every head turned. Chloe, the blonde in the red dress, was already standing up. She looked at Marcus, then at Elena, and then at the exit sign. Chloe, wait. Marcus called out, desperate for an ally. This is just a tactic. She's lying. Chloe snapped her gum, clutching her designer purse, a purse Eleanor knew Marcus had bought with company funds. Honey, Chloe said, her voice dripping with disdain. I don't date employees. I date owners. And it looks like you just became an employee. She turned on her heel and walked out, the click-clack of her heels echoing like gunshots. Order! Judge Caldwell banged his gavel as the gallery erupted in murmurs. Mr. Sterling, unless you have a valid objection, based on law, and not just your client's bruised ego, I am ready to issue my ruling." Sterling slumped into his chair. "No objection, Your Honor." "Very well," the judge declaimed. "Per the strict enforcement of the prenuptial agreement requested by the plaintiff, Mr. Thorne, all assets are to remain separate. Mr. Thorne retains his personal savings of $12 million. Mrs. Thorne retains the Vander Haven Trust and all subsidiary entities including Blackwood Holdings." The judge paused, looking directly at Marcus. "Furthermore, since Blackwood Holdings holds the primary lien on the Thorne Dynamics headquarters and intellectual property, due to the initial seed funding contract, which implies a callable loan status, Mrs. Thorne has the legal right to call in that debt at any time. If Mr. Thorne cannot pay the $2 million, plus the compounded interest and penalty fees, roughly $40 million, immediately ownership of the intellectual property reverts to Blackwood." Marcus gasped. "$40 million? I don't have $40 million liquid." "You know I don't. Then I suggest you be very polite to your ex-wife," Judge Caldwell said, closing the folder. "Divorce granted. Court is adjourned." Marcus scrambled over the divider, ignoring his lawyer. He grabbed Elena's arm as she gathered her tote bag. "Elena, wait! Baby, wait!" he pleaded, his eyes wild. "We can fix this. I was stressed. The company. The pressure. It got to me. I didn't mean to hurt you. Let's go get dinner. Let's talk about this. We're partners. Remember, you and me against the world." Elena looked down at his hand on her sleeve. She didn't pull away violently. She just looked at it with such intense indifference that Marcus let go as if he'd been burned. "We aren't partners, Marcus," she said calmly. "We're business associates, and you're late for a meeting." "What meeting?" "Oh, the emergency board meeting," Elena said, checking her cheap wristwatch. "It starts in 45 minutes. I called it this morning. Don't be late. I hate tardiness." She walked out of the courtroom, leaving Marcus standing alone in the center of the aisle, the laughter of the gallery now entirely at his expense. Thorne Dynamics was headquartered in a sleek 40-story glass obelisk in downtown Los Angeles. It was a monument to Marcus's ego. His name was etched in silver above the revolving doors. 40 minutes after the court hearing, Marcus sprinted into the lobby, breathless and disheveled. His tie was crooked, and sweat had darkened his shirt. He barked at the security guard. "Let me through. I need the elevator to the executive suite now." The guard, a burly man named Henry, who had worked there for 3 years, didn't move. He stood in front of the turnstiles, arms crossed. "Mr. Thorne," Henry said, his voice flat, "I can't let you up without a pass." "A pass?" Marcus screamed, his voice echoing in the marble lobby. "I own this building. I'm the CEO. Get out of my way, Henry, or you're fired." "Actually, sir," Henry said, glancing at a tablet in his hand, "building management sent a memo 10 minutes ago. Your clearance code has been revoked pending a security review." "Revoked? Who revoked it?" "The new chairwoman of the board," Henry said. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. He pulled out his phone to call Sterling, but his hands were shaking so badly he dropped it. "Let me up, Henry, please. This is a misunderstanding." Henry looked at him with pity. He remembered how Marcus used to yell at the cleaning staff. He remembered how Marcus had fired Henry's sister for being 5 minutes late. "I can issue you a visitor's badge, sir, but you'll have to be escorted." 10 minutes later, Marcus was humiliated. He was marched through his own office floor, flanked by 2 security guards. The open-plan office, usually buzzing with the sound of coding and sales calls, was deadly silent. The employees, programmers, designers, interns stood at their desks watching him. They knew News traveled fast on social media. The video of the courtroom revelation was already trending on Twitter. He saw smirks. He saw whispers. The fear he used to command was gone, replaced by the voyeuristic glee of watching a tyrant fall. They reached the double oak doors of the boardroom. Marcus threw them open. The long mahogany table was occupied. The 6 other board members, old men in grey suits who usually rubber-stamped whatever Marcus wanted, sat in silence. They looked uncomfortable, and at the head of the table in Marcus's leather executive chair sat Elena. She hadn't changed clothes. She was still wearing the grey cardigan and the worn-out flats, but the way she sat spine straight, chin up, hands resting on the table, made her look more powerful than anyone in the room. "You're in my seat," Marcus spat, trying to regain some dominance. "I'm in the chair's seat," Elena corrected. "And since Blackwood Holdings exercised its option to convert its debt into equity, 20 minutes ago I now control 51% of the voting stock. The hostile takeover is complete, Marcus." "You can't do that without a shareholder vote," Marcus shouted, looking at the other board members. "Jim Robert, say something. She's stealing the company." Jim Reynolds, the CFO, cleared his throat nervously. "Actually, Marcus, the contract you signed with Blackwood 5 years ago was very specific. It granted super voting rights in the event of a leadership crisis. And," Jim glanced at a file in front of him, "since you used company funds to lease a penthouse for Ms. Chloe Miller and pay for her extensive jewelry collection, that constitutes embezzlement. That is a crisis." Marcus froze. I was going to pay it back." "With what?" Elena asked. "Your salary." She slid a folder across the long table. It stopped perfectly at the edge right in front of him. "This is a termination notice, Marcus," Elena said. Her voice was devoid of anger, which made it terrifying. It was purely transactional. "For cause, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and gross reputational damage to the brand." "You can't fire me," Marcus whispered. "I am Thorn Dynamics. The code, it's mine. The vision is mine." "The code belongs to the company," Elena said. "And the vision, your vision lately has been focused on magazine covers and yachts. We've lost 3 major contracts in the last quarter because you were too busy partying in Ibiza to attend the meetings. I read the minutes, Marcus. I read everything." She stood up. The board members instinctively straightened up, showing deference. "However," Elena continued, walking slowly around the table toward him, "I am not a monster. I know this company is your life, so I am willing to offer you a position." Hope flared in Marcus's eyes. "A consultant role chief strategy officer." Elena stopped in front of him. She looked him up and down, just as he had looked at her in the courtroom when he called her a gold digger. "No," she said. "The janitorial lead for the night shift just quit. It pays $22 an hour. Benefits kick in after 90 days. The boardroom was silent enough to hear a pin drop. "You're joking," Marcus choked out. "It's a job, Marcus," Elena said, her eyes flashing with a sudden sharp intensity. "It's honest work. It's exactly the kind of nothing you thought I was worth. You have 24 hours to clear out your office. If you want the job report to Henry in the lobby at 8:00 p.m. tomorrow. If not, security will escort you out now." Marcus looked around the room. Jim looked away. The others studied their papers. He was alone. "I built this," he screamed, lunging toward her. 2 security guards stepped out from the shadows, grabbing Marcus by the arms before he could get within 3 feet of Elena. "Get him out of here," Elena said, turning her back on him to address the board. "Now, gentlemen, let's discuss the Q3 roadmap. We have a lot of work to do to clean up this mess." As Marcus was dragged out of the room, kicking and shouting, Elena didn't look back. She simply picked up the laser pointer, clicked the screen to the next slide, and began to speak. But as the doors closed, cutting off Marcus's screams, she noticed one person in the corner of the room who hadn't looked away. It was a man she hadn't noticed before. He was sitting in the back, leaning against the wall, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that fit a little too perfectly. He wasn't a board member. He was watching her with an intensity that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. He was applauding, a slow, singular clap. Elena paused. "Who are you?" she asked. The stranger stepped into the light. He was strikingly handsome, with dark eyes and a scar running through his left eyebrow. "My name is Julian Vance," he said, his voice smooth and deep. "I'm your cousin, and the executor of the Vanderhaven Main estate. Grandma sent me. She thinks you're going to need help with what comes next." Elena frowned. "What comes next? I just won." Julian smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was a warning. "Marcus is a fool, Elena, but the people he borrowed money from to cover his gambling debts, they aren't fools. And now that they know you have the money, they're coming for you." 3 hours after being escorted out of his own building, Marcus Thorne found himself in a place very different from his penthouse. He was in the back room of a dim, humid pool hall in East Los Angeles, kneeling on sticky linoleum. His lip was bleeding. His bespoke suit jacket was torn at the shoulder. Sitting in front of him on a folding chair was Silas Vane. Silas wasn't a banker. He wasn't an investor. He was a loan shark who catered to the desperate elite men like Marcus, who had leveraged their futures on bad bets and confident lies. "You're late with my interest payment, Marcus," Silas said softly, cleaning his fingernails with a small switchblade. "And I saw the news. You got fired from your own company. It's a temporary setback," Marcus gasped, wiping blood from his mouth. "I'm going to sue. I'm going to get it back." "You have nothing," Silas said, standing up. He was a towering man with tattoos creeping up his neck. "You owe me $6 million, Marcus. Gambling debts. Cover-ups for your little mistress. I fronted you that cash because you were a CEO. Now you're just a guy with a bad credit score." Silas nodded to 2 heavy-set men in the corner. "Break his legs, then we'll see what his kidneys are worth on the black market." "Wait! Wait!" Marcus screamed, scrambling backward until he hit the wall. "I can pay you. I can pay you double." Silas paused. "With what?" "My wife," Marcus panted. "My ex-wife. Elena. Did you see the news? Did you see the trust fund?" Silas's eyes narrowed. "I saw." "She has $3 billion, Marcus said, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and malicious hope. "She's soft. She's weak. She doesn't know how to handle that kind of money. She doesn't have security. She lives alone." Silas crouched down, bringing his face inches from Marcus's. "Are you suggesting I rob your wife?" "I'm suggesting—" "Leverage," Marcus whispered. "She still loves me. Deep down. If I'm in trouble, if I'm kidnapped, she'll pay. She'll pay anything to save me. We split the ransom. You get your 6 million plus 10 more for the trouble. I get a fresh start." Silas stared at him for a long moment, then smiled. It was a shark's smile. "You really are a piece of trash, Marcus. Selling out the woman you cheated on. It's business," Marcus said, sweating. "Fine," Silas said. He stood up and sheathed the knife. "But you're the bait. If this goes wrong, if she doesn't pay, I won't just break your legs. I'll bury you in the desert." Meanwhile, in the penthouse of the Thorn Dynamics Tower, which Elena had moved into, that afternoon the mood was tense. Elena stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city lights. She held a glass of whiskey, her hand shaking slightly. "You need to stop shaking," Julian Vance said. He was sitting on the white leather sofa, scrolling through a tablet. "Fear is a scent. Predators can smell it." "I'm not afraid," Elena said, turning to face her cousin. "I'm angry. I spent 5 years playing the role of the supportive wife. I made myself small so he could feel big. And now, I feel exposed." "You are exposed," Julian said bluntly. "Grandma kept the Vanderhaven name hidden for a reason. Our family has enemies, old enemies, and new ones." Julian stood up and walked over to a whiteboard he had set up in the living room. He uncapped a marker. "Here is the situation," he said, drawing a circle. "Marcus is desperate. He owes money to a syndicate run by a man named Silas Vane. Dangerous people. They don't sue. They break bones." Elena's eyes widened. "Marcus is involved with the mob. He has a gambling problem you didn't know about because he was using company accounts to hide it. That's why he was so desperate for the divorce settlement to go his way. He needed your share to pay off the debt." Julian drew a line from Marcus to Elena. "Now that he's cut off, he has 2 options. Run or come for you. Knowing Marcus, his ego is too big to run. He thinks he can manipulate you." "He can't," Elena said, her voice hardening. "I'm done with him." "Good," Julian said. "Because tonight is the Thorn Dynamics annual charity gala. It was scheduled months ago. The press is expecting Marcus, but you're going to show up instead. I can't go to a party tonight, Julian." "You have to," Julian insisted. "You took the company, now you have to take the narrative. If you hide, stock prices drop. If you walk in there like a queen, the market stabilizes." "But," Julian paused, his expression dark. "It's also a trap." "A trap for who?" "For them," Julian said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. He opened it. Inside was a brooch, a diamond-encrusted panther. But underneath the gems, a tiny red light blinked. "This is a panic beacon," Julian explained. "GPS tracker audio relay, and it connects directly to a private security team I've hired. They are ex-Mossad. They will be in the crowd, dressed as waiters, guests, and photographers." Elena took the brooch. It was heavy. "You want me to be the bait," she realized. "I want you to finish this," Julian said. "Silas Vane will be there. He won't be able to resist a room full of billionaires. He'll try to get to you through Marcus. We're going to let him." Elena pinned the brooch to her cardigan. She looked at her reflection in the window. The scared girl from the courtroom was gone. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's go hunting." The grand Los Angeles ballroom was dripping with crystals and gold. The city's elite politicians, actors, tech moguls were sipping champagne and whispering about the scandal of the century. The divorce was the only topic of conversation. "I heard she was a secret heiress. I heard she bought the building while he was in court. I heard Marcus is ruined." At 8:00 p.m. the double doors swung open. The room went silent. Elena entered. She wasn't wearing her grey cardigan. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue silk that hugged every curve, with a slit up the leg that was daring but elegant. On her shoulder the diamond panther brooch glittered under the chandeliers. Her hair was swept up, exposing her neck. She looked like $1 billion. Julian walked a step behind her, looking dangerous and sharp in a tuxedo. The photographers went into a frenzy. Flashes blinded her, but Elena didn't blink. She walked straight to the podium, where the microphone waited. "Good evening," she said, her voice amplified across the hall. "I am Elena Vance, the new CEO of Thorn Dynamics." Applause rippled through the room, tentative at first, then thunderous. People love a winner. As she stepped off the stage to mingle, a waiter bumped into her. He pressed a napkin into her hand. "Don't react," the waiter whispered. Elena looked down at the napkin. Scrawled in shaky handwriting were the words, "Terrace. 5 minutes, or they kill me." "Marcus." She looked at Julian. He gave a microscopic nod. He had seen it, too. The trap was sprung. Elena made her way through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling all while her heart hammered against her ribs. She reached the glass doors leading to the private terrace balcony. It was dark outside, the city noise muffled. She stepped out. Marcus was there. He looked terrible. He was wearing an ill-fitting suit, and his face was bruised. He was shivering. "Elena," he choked out. "You came." "What do you want, Marcus?" she asked coldly, keeping her distance. I wanted to apologize," he said, stepping closer. "I wanted to tell you I was wrong. About everything." "You wrote a note saying they would kill you," Elena said. "Who is they?" "Us." A deep voice rumbled from the shadows. Silas Vane stepped out from behind a pillar. 2 other men blocked the door back to the ballroom. Elena didn't scream. She didn't run. She stood perfectly still, fingering the brooch on her shoulder. "So this is the billionaire," Silas said, looking her up and down. "You look expensive. And you look like you're trespassing, Elena said calmly. Silas laughed. "She's got fire. I like that. Listen, Mrs. Thorn, your husband here owes me $6 million. Since you took his money, I figure you took his debts too." "He's not my husband," Elena said, "and his debts are not my problem." "They become your problem when I throw him off this balcony," Silas said, grabbing Marcus by the collar and shoving him toward the railing. It was a 20-story drop. Marcus screamed, "Elena, please pay him. Just write him a check. You have billions." Elena looked at Marcus, dangling over the edge of the abyss. She saw the man she had loved, the man she had supported, the man who had laughed at her in court while his mistress chewed gum. "Let him go," Elena said. "Pay me," Silas demanded. "No," Elena said. Silas blinked. "What?" "I said no. I won't pay you his debt." Silas's face twisted in anger. "Then he dies, and you watch." "No one is dying tonight," Elena said. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Except maybe your career, Mr. Vane." She held up the paper. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. Silas squinted. "Paper." "It's a purchase order," Elena said. "Dated 2 hours ago. My cousin Julian is very efficient. He found out who you answer to. A syndicate in Chicago, right?" Silas stiffened. "It turns out your bosses are trying to go legit. They're investing in tech startups, so I made a call. I offered them a 10% stake in Thorn Dynamics, in exchange for one thing." Elena took a step forward, her eyes blazing. "I bought your debt portfolio, Silas. All of it. Every loan shark ledger you have. I own it. Which means I own you." Silas let go of Marcus, who collapsed onto the concrete, sobbing. Silas looked at Elena with genuine fear. You spoke to the capo?" "I did," Elena said. "And he told me that if you bothered me, I could terminate your employment. Permanently." Suddenly the glass doors to the balcony shattered inward. Julian burst through, gun drawn, followed by 6 men in tactical gear, the waiters from the party. Red laser dots danced on Silas's chest. "On your knees," Julian commanded. Silas dropped to his knees, hands behind his head. Marcus looked up from the floor, wiping snot and tears from his face. He looked at Elena with a mixture of awe and terror. She had just out-gangstered a gangster. "Elena," Marcus wept. "You saved me. You saved me. I knew you still loved me." Elena walked over to Marcus. She looked down at him with zero emotion. "I didn't save you for you, Marcus," she said. She signaled to Julian. "Get this filth out of here," she said, pointing to Silas. "The police are waiting in the freight elevator." "And him?" Julian asked, pointing his gun at Marcus. Elena knelt down so she was eye level with her ex-husband. "You owe $6 million, she whispered. "And since I bought the debt, you owe it to me." Marcus's eyes widened. "I'm not going to break your legs, Marcus," Elena said softly. "I'm going to garnish your wages. Every cent you make for the rest of your life belongs to me until you pay off the principal plus interest. And the interest rate," she smiled a cold, terrifying smile, "it's 50%, compounded daily." She stood up and brushed invisible dust off her dress. "Welcome to your new life, Marcus. You're my servant now." Elena turned and walked back into the ballroom, leaving the cold night air behind her. As the doors closed, the sound of the applause from inside swelled again, drowning out Marcus's cries. 6 months had passed since the night on the balcony. The 40-story glass obelisk of Thorn Dynamics no longer vibrated with the frantic, chaotic energy of a tech frat house. The ping-pong tables were gone. The kegs of craft beer in the break room had been replaced by espresso machines and ergonomic workstations. The air on the executive floor, once thick with the smell of Marcus's expensive cologne, and fear now carried the crisp scent of white orchids and ozone. Elena Vance sat behind the desk, a massive slab of reclaimed black obsidian that seemed to absorb the light. She wasn't just occupying the office, she was commanding it. Under her leadership, the company's stock had stabilized, then skyrocketed. She had cut the vaporware projects Marcus used to hype up investors and refocused the engineers on solid ethical infrastructure. She tapped her stylus against her tablet, reviewing the Q3 projections. Up 200%. The intercom on her desk buzzed. It was her new executive assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah. "Ms. Vance Gavin Sterling is here. He's 10 minutes early for his 200th p.m. Elena didn't look up. "Let him wait 10 minutes, then. Punctuality is a virtue, but desperation is unbecoming." At exactly 2:00 p.m., the double doors opened. Gavin Sterling, the man who had once strutted around the courtroom like a peacock, shuffled in. He looked like a ghost of his former self. His suit, usually tailored to the millimeter, hung loosely on his frame. His skin was sallow, and his eyes darted around the room, unable to settle on the woman who now owned the building. He didn't sit until Elena gestured to the chair opposite her. "Elena." "Miss Vance," Sterling started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat. "Thank you for seeing me. I know you're busy." "I am," Elena said, her voice cool and smooth, like polished stone. "You have 5 minutes, Mr. Sterling. State your business." Sterling wiped sweat from his upper lip. I wanted to come here personally, to discuss a settlement regarding the malpractice suit you filed against my firm. It's aggressive, Ms. Vance. If this goes to trial, it will ruin me. It's not a malpractice suit, Gavin. Eleanor corrected him gently. It's a criminal referral. Sterling went pale. Now hold on. Anything I did for Marcus was covered under attorney-client privilege. You can't touch me. Elena opened a drawer and pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder. She slid it across the obsidian desk. It stopped inches from Sterling's shaking hands. Privilege doesn't cover the commission of a crime, Gavin. That's the crime-fraud exception. And I have the receipts. Sterling opened the folder. His eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. These are my private emails, my encrypted signal chats. How you used Thorn Dynamics servers to host your private communication node. Elena explained, leaning back in her chair. Marcus thought it was clever. He thought it kept his data off the public cloud. But when I took over the company, I took over the servers. I own the physical hard drives, Gavin. She pointed to a specific email printout. That one there, dated 3 months before the divorce filing. That's you instructing Marcus on how to route company funds through a shell company in the Cayman Islands to hide assets from me. You didn't just defend him. You conspired with him to defraud a spouse. That's a felony. Sterling dropped the folder. Eleanor, please. I have a family. I have a mortgage. I was just doing what the client asked. You were the bully in the playground, Gavin. Eleanor said, her eyes narrowing. You laughed when Marcus humiliated me. You tried to leave me on the street with $5,000. You didn't care about my survival then. Why should I care about your mortgage now? She pressed the intercom button. Sarah, please have security escort Mr. Sterling out and send a copy of this folder to the State Bar Association. Priority courier. No, you can't, Sterling shouted as 2 guards appeared at the door. It's already done, Elena said, turning back to her screen. Goodbye, Mr. Sterling. As Sterling was dragged out, protesting weakly, the office fell silent again. But the peace was short-lived. 30 minutes later, the intercom buzzed again. Sarah sounded flustered this time. Ms. Vance, I'm so sorry to disturb you, but there's a situation in the lobby. It's Chloe Miller. She's screaming. She says she has dirt on Marcus that you need to see. She's demanding to be let up. Elena sighed, rubbing her temples. The ghosts of the past were persistent today. She doesn't have dirt, Sarah. She has debt, Elena said. Tell Henry to handle it. She's refusing to leave, Mom. She's making a scene. Elena pressed the talk button. Sarah, tell Henry to inform Ms. Miller that the repo team I hired has just arrived at her apartment. Tell her they are currently seizing the lease on her Mercedes and, oh yes, the Cartier collection. The jewelry. Marcus bought that jewelry with embezzled company funds, Elena said efficiently. Legally, it's stolen property. If she wants to avoid an accessory to grand larceny charge, I suggest she hand over the bracelet she's wearing to Henry and run. There was a pause, and then Sarah's voice came back, sounding impressed. Understood, Miss Vance. Elena imagined the scene downstairs, the blonde in the red dress, once so smug, now fleeing the building barefoot to save her freedom. It didn't bring Elena joy exactly. It brought a sense of mathematical precision. The equation was finally balancing. The sun began to set, casting long orange shadows across the office. Elena worked until the city lights flickered to life below her. At 9:00 p.m., she finally packed her bag. The building was silent as she took the private elevator down. The hum of the ventilation system was the only sound. The elevator doors chimed and slid open into the cavernous marble lobby. It was empty save for the security desk and one other figure. Over near the decorative fountain, a man in a grey jumpsuit was working. He was pushing a heavy industrial mop across the floor in slow, rhythmic strokes. The name tag on his chest read, Thorn Dynamics Facilities. It was Marcus. He looked 20 years older. His hair, once perfectly styled with expensive gel, was thinning and grey. His posture, usually arrogant and upright, was stooped. He looked exhausted, a bone-deep weariness that comes from physical labour and crushed dreams. Elena's heels clicked on the marble. Marcus froze. He didn't look up immediately. He just gripped the handle of the mop tighter, his knuckles white. Eleanor stopped 10 feet away. "You missed a spot," she said softly. "By the planter." Marcus slowly raised his head. His eyes met hers. There was no defiance left in them, only shame. "Yes, Ms. Vance," he mumbled. "I'll get it. How are the payments coming along, Marcus?" Marcus leaned on the mop, letting out a shaky breath. It's hard, Eleanor. The garnishment takes 60% of the paycheck. The rest goes to the hostel. I'm eating canned beans. I haven't bought new shoes in 6 months. He looked down at his work boots. They were scuffed and worn. "Elena, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "How long do I have to do this? The debt is $6 million. With the interest, I'll be mopping floors until I'm 80. Have mercy, please." Elena looked at him. She remembered the nights she had ironed his shirts. She remembered the way he had looked at her in court, laughing as he threw her life away. "You liked contracts, Marcus," she said, her voice devoid of malice but heavy with finality. "You stood in front of a judge and demanded strict enforcement. You said ironclad. That's how I do business. Remember?" Marcus flinched, as if she had struck him. "I bought your debt from Silas to save your life," Elena continued. "But I didn't say the rescue was free. You signed the repayment agreement. You accepted the terms. You are simply living by the rules you tried to force on me." "But I was your husband," Marcus cried out, tears welling in his eyes. "Doesn't that mean anything? Don't you have a heart?" Elena adjusted the strap of her bag. "I do have a heart, Marcus. I used it to forgive you for being poor when we met. I used it to build you up. I used it to love you when you were nothing." She took a step closer, her gaze piercing him. "But you broke that heart. And when you break something valuable, you have to pay for it." She walked past him, heading toward the revolving doors. "Elena!" he shouted after her, his voice echoing in the empty, cold lobby. I'm sorry for everything." Elena paused at the glass doors. She didn't turn around. She caught his reflection in the glass, a small grey man in a grey suit, standing in the middle of an empire he had lost because of his own greed. "I know you are," she said to the reflection. "Work hard, Marcus. The night shift ends at 6:00 a.m. She pushed through the doors and stepped out into the cool night air. Her cousin Julian was waiting by the black town car, holding the door open. He looked at her, then glanced back at the man in the lobby. "All debts collected?" Julian asked, a small smile playing on his lips. Elena looked up at the stars, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders that she hadn't realized she was carrying. "Yes," she said, sliding into the car. "The ledger is balanced." As the car pulled away, merging into the stream of city traffic, Marcus Thorne was left alone in the silence, gripping his mop trapped in the glass cage he had built for himself. They thought she was a victim. They thought she was a footnote in a rich man's life, a stepping stone he could discard when he reached the top. But when the laughter in that courtroom died, Elena proved that the quietest person in the room is often the one holding all the cards. This wasn't just revenge. It was a brutal lesson in karma. Be careful who you step on your way up, because they might just own the building you're standing on when you come crashing down. Marcus wanted a world of strict contracts and cold, hard cash. He got it. If your jaw dropped when the judge read that $3 billion valuation, smash that like button right now. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that justice is best served ice cold. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another story of incredible twists and real-life retribution. Thanks for watching.